Okay, so we started off the session by doing a slow jog around the court, going into side steps and then what we call karaoke's, which are kind of like crossing quick feet, you'll see in the video. And then after that, I told him to do some stretches. He's a physiotherapy student, so he obviously knows what stretches are needed for him, so I just let him lead that himself. And I told him to focus a lot on his lower body, as a lot of what we would be doing in the session was footwork based. So after this warm up, we went into a more badminton specific warm up drill, which would help a lot with footwork. And so the idea is there's 6 shuttles in the centre of the court. You pick them up individually and then take them into the 6 corners of the court. So here I just explain it through to him what he has to do, telling him to make sure to get right into the corners. So we did this 4 times with a minute gap in between each one. So this next drill is called shadowing. Basically, there's no shuttles involved, but he will have a racket, and it involves going to all corners of the court and playing a shadow shot, so pretending you're hitting the shuttle. Again, this is another good warm-up drill for footwork, and it's quite good, as the aim of the session was looking at his movement from the back of the court to the front of the court, and also his shots at the front of the court. So this is quite good for getting him moving around, going from the back of the court to the front of the court and vice versa. For this first set, you can see now, I told him that he can go to whichever side he wants. And for this one you're seeing now, I stood at the net and directed him where to go. So again, each set lasted for a minute. We did 4 of them with a minute rest break in between. As Will is a county level athlete, he had done a lot of these drills before, including that one, so he didn't really need it explaining to him. For this one, this is just a warm up, getting him used to actually hitting a shuttle, so just getting his eye in kind of thing. So it's just a simple knock up that you'd have at the start of any training session. So start off with just basic clears. We then move into a bit of play at the net, and then him doing drop shots and lifts, which were the main shots that he'd be focusing on in the training session. So it was just getting him used to what he was going to be doing. So there, the strings on his racket actually broke, and we had to start that part again with clears, as he was using a different racket, and therefore had to get used to using that one. So as this coaching session was based on his performance in his last game, I explained to him that the results of the analysis that I'd done said that he struggled at the net quite a lot, specifically coming from the back of the court to the front of the court. So the first proper drill we did were just looking at his forehand and backhand tumbles at the net, improving the quality of them. So I explained the drill to him, explained that I would simply be on the other side feeding the shuttle to him. All he had to do was come forward, lunge and play a tumble, forehand or backhand depending on what side it was on, and then go back to the base in the middle. So I see there I put rackets on the floor as almost targets for him to hit. So I explained to him that he needed to get the shuttle as tight to the net as possible and also hit it as high up as possible to avoid the shot looping. So we started off on his forehand with 12 shuttles each, and then moved on to his backhand with 12 shuttles again. We did this twice with a minute gap in between. So on his backhand, a lot of his shots were quite loopy, so I just had to stop and tell him that he was doing it to try and take the shuttle higher to the net and also put a little bit less on it so it came over the net at a lower height. Obviously, if he was doing this in game, I explained to him that his opponent would quite easily be able to just come forward and kill it, as you can see now. So as the progression for this exercise, we then made it so I would throw the shuttle to either side and I wouldn't tell him which. So he had to react and get there as quickly as possible to take the shuttle high. As well as just playing it straight, I also said that if he wanted to, he could play it cross court, or if he felt he needed to as the shuttle was too low, he could also play a lift. So one of the things I had to tell him in this is a few of the cross courts he did, he was taking too low, which resulted in a very loopy shot again. A lot of them, he would have been better off just either playing it straight or as a lift. So in this drill we started to incorporate his movement from the back of the court to the front of the court. And how we would do it is it would start off with a shadow clear at the back of the court. I told him he could go to either his forehand or backhand. And then he would come forward where I would be feeding a shuttle to either his forehand or backhand. Again, like the previous drill, I didn't tell him which. And he would come in and play a tumble as he did before. Again, I told him he could play a drop, straight, cross court, or if he needed to, lift it. So again, like in the previous drill, his shot selection wasn't the best. So he was coming forward and playing some cross courts that he really shouldn't have been playing. So for example, that one there. So again, I just had to point that out to him. Tell him to, if he can, get forward and play it higher. If it's low, then he's better off just playing a lift to the back of the court. So the progression of that previous drill was that we would now have him playing a shot at the back of the court and then coming forward to play one at the net, and it would keep going in a loop. So I would lift it at the net. He would play an overhead drop. I told him to always try and play around the head if he can. He tried playing backhands a lot, which I wanted to try and get him out of the habit of doing. So he would then come forward to the net where I would play a drop. He would play a tumble, and I would lift again, and it would just keep going in a loop. One thing I had to tell him to do was to kind of, even though he knows where the shot's going, to pretend that he's in a game situation. Because quite a lot he just hit the shot and then came straight forward rather than going back to his base in the middle of the court, which obviously in a game situation he would never do. I should also point out as well, as stated before, he's a county level athlete, so his technique is already very good, and he didn't really need obviously any technique demonstrating to him. Also for this drill, instead of mixing it up with forehand and backhand, we did each hand individually. Also for this, we did 3 sets on forehand and 3 sets on the backhand. We alternated, so it would go forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. Each set lasted approximately 2 minutes, depending on how long the rallies lasted. And he was given half a minute break in between each set. Throughout the entire session, I was telling him whenever he did shots very well. So, for example, in this exercise coming up, he plays a drop shot that just clips the net cord and goes over, which is pretty much the best kind of shot you can do. So I gave him the positive reinforcement when he played it well. So the last exercise we did was a bit of game-based practice. So we played against a game of half-court singles to 15. But for Will, if he scored a point with a drop shot that landed in front of the service line on my side, he would gain 2 points. However, if he hit a drop shot into the net, I would get 2 points. I chose to do half-court singles as it focuses a lot more on his movement from the back of the court to the front and vice versa. I also tried to replicate some of the drills that we had previously done. So you'll see I try and play a lot of lifts into drops, like in the exercises. Also later on in the game I start to add in more shots. So you'll notice in the first few rallies I don't really play any smashes, whereas later in the game I start to do so. One thing as well that I had to tell him, because he was focused a lot on trying to get the shuttle to land in the front of the court, I had to point out to him that obviously he could play shots like smashes to try and win the rally. A lot of the time his drops were quite good, and they were forcing me into a short lift, but because he was trying to get it in the front of the court, he wasn't finishing off the rallies. So I had to actually tell him if I do a short lift, to just kill it. So we finished off the session with just a quick warm down. During the session, he said that his hamstring was a bit tight, so the warm down was very important to do. So we just had a slow jog around the court again, like in the warm up, obviously a lot slower. And then I had him do some stretches. Again, I let him lead this kind of by himself, as he knows what he's doing with it more than I do. So while he's stretching, I get his feedback on the session. So I asked him how he found it. He said it was very tiring and there was a lot of fitness aspects involved, which he liked, as that was one of the things he wanted to improve. And he also felt that the session was needed after his previous performance, in which he did make a lot of mistakes at the net, which is obviously what he wanted to work on at the end of the day.